In any case, so what were Omar and Tlaib actually going to do in Israel? As I say, their itinerary was labeled Trip to Palestine, which in and of itself eliminates the Jewish state. There is no actual territory called Palestine. It does not legally exist. There are Palestinian administered territories that are disputed under international law and that Israel claims ownership of, both historically as well as in terms of winning a war, which they did in 1967 as well as 1973. Both wars initiated by Israel's enemies. Well, what exactly was on their itinerary? Well, apparently, the Office of the Prime Minister of Israel has revealed that Omar and Tlaib had plans on meeting with organizations during their visit that have expressed support for terrorism against the nation. The Office of Prime Minister Netanyahu tweeted, quote, "The itinerary of the two congresswomen reveals that the sole purpose of their visit is to harm Israel and increase incitement against it. In addition, the organization that is funding their trip is Mifta, which is an avid supporter of BDS and among whose members are those who have expressed support for terrorism against Israel." Okay, so what is this Mifta group? Okay, that's a non-governmental organization that is extremely anti-Semitic. Okay, they have ties to terrorist sympathizers. They have falsely accused Jews of using the blood of Christians in the Jewish Passover. Mifta, this group that these women were traveling with, has also reportedly praised suicide bombers and deems terrorists as being national heroes. One of the most stunning findings on the group, according to Ryan Saavedra at Daily Wire, is that they have on their website promoted content from a neo-Nazi organization which itself promotes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that Jews control the media. The author of the article in question that was promoted on the Mifta website is the research staff of National Vanguard Books, which is a neo-Nazi organization, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay, they actually put out a piece on their website talking about the evils of miscegenation. I mean, it's unbelievable. A closer look at the travel itinerary for Omar and Tlaib shows they also planned on meeting with additional extremist organizations, including the Defense for Children International Palestine, which has ties to terrorism. NGO Monitor reports that DCIP leads the campaign exploiting children to promote demonization of Israel and is linked to the PFLP terror group. Many of its allegations are false and part of attempts to smear Israel with allegations of war crimes and promote BDS. Several past and current DCIP board members and employees have apparent ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a designated terror organization by the U.S., EU, Canada, as well as Israel, and they support BDS, which Nancy Pelosi called like 2 months ago anti-Semitic. Seth Mandel of Washington Examiner magazine, he tweeted, "One reason you won't see coverage of the organization funding Tlaib and Omar's trip is that it would undermine the narrative this is about criticism of Israeli policy. It shows the true face of BDS, blood libels, Nazi screeds, celebration of terrorists." And naturally, he's right. The media have completely ignored all of this. Okay, so President Trump had suggested that Israel bar them. And Trump is doing this for his own political reasons. One of those reasons is that President Trump would like to make Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib the faces of the Democratic Party. He wants to force Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Chuck Schumer to all get behind the most radical members of the Democratic Party so that he can run against them. And it's not a bad domestic political strategy. So there is some strategy to it. It's also true that Trump happens to be morally right when he says that Israel shouldn't let these people in. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the strategy here in a second, whether it benefits Israel, whether Israel did the politically right thing in barring these women. I think that the case is getting stronger that they did, actually, as these women expose their own agenda. But President Trump had made the very strong case that Israel shouldn't let these people in. People are now in the United States saying, how dare he say something like, really? Really? Okay, if you're a Democrat and you went out there and suggested that Mexico shouldn't let Trump in, do you think there'd be any hubbub at all about that? Like really on the part of the media? Would that be considered unpatriotic? If some Democrat suggested that Steve King should be barred from entry to, for example, an African nation, do you think that anybody in media or government would think that this was an element of treason? Here's Trump saying Israel shouldn't have to let in people who want to destroy it.
If you look at their language, if you look at what they've said, if I ever said it, it would be a horrible month, to put it mildly. So the things that they've said, Omar, Tlaib, what they've said is disgraceful. So I can't imagine why Israel would let them in. But if they want to let them in, they can. But I can't imagine why they would do it.
Okay, and then he continued along those lines. He said they've said some of the worst things about Israel. And, of course, everything he is saying here is 100% true.
I think that if Israel allowed them to come in for the normal reasons, other than those reasons, I really believe that It would be a terrible thing for Israel. I think it would show a terrible sign. They want to do boycotts. They said horrible things about Jewish people. They said horrible things about Israel and Israelis. I think it would be a terrible thing, frankly, for Israel to let these two people who speak so badly about Israel come in.
And the media's response, how dare Trump? Again, if this were Barack Obama as president talking about Steve King visiting Africa, no one would think that that was a bad thing, right? Or if he had said that about Donald Trump visiting Mexico, right, then nobody would think that that was a bad thing, particularly in the media. In 1 second, I'm going to get to what the Prime Minister of Israel has to say about all of this. It is obvious what the agenda was from the start. Today, Rashid Tlair. Okay, so Prime Minister Netanyahu put out this statement. No country in the world respects America and the American Congress more than the state of Israel. As a free and vibrant democracy, Israel is open to critics and criticism, with one exception. Israeli law prohibits the entry into Israel of those who call for and work to impose boycotts on Israel, as do other democracies that prohibit the entry of people who seek to harm the country. In fact, in the past, the U.S. did this to an Israeli member of Knesset, as well as to other public figures from around the world. This is true. In 2012, the Obama administration barred a member of Knesset named Ben Ari, and they did so because he was associated with the Kahana Chai Party, which is considered a terrorist organization in the United States, the Kach Party. He was no longer in the Kach Party, but his past with the Kach Party led the United States to bar him from entry. An entire Israeli delegation then canceled its trip. This was not considered a big deal at the time because countries have rules. Prime Minister of Israel continues. Congresswomen Tlaib and Omar are leading activists in promoting the legislation of boycotts against Israel in the American Congress. Only a few days ago, we received their itinerary for their visit in Israel, which revealed that they plan a visit whose sole objective is to strengthen the boycott against us and deny Israel's legitimacy. For instance, they listed the destination of their trip as Palestine and not Israel. And unlike all Democratic and Republican members of Congress who have visited Israel, they did not request to meet any Israeli officials, either from the government or the opposition. A week ago, Israel warmly welcomed some 70 Democratic and Republican members of Congress who expressed broad bipartisan support for Israel, which was also demonstrated a month ago in a resounding bipartisan vote against BDS in Congress. However, the itinerary of the two congresswomen reveals the sole purpose of their visit is to harm Israel and increase incitement against it. In addition, the organization funding their trip is MIFTA, which is an avid supporter of BDS, and among whose members are those who have expressed support for terrorism against Israel. Therefore, the Minister of Interior has decided not to allow their visit, and I, as Prime Minister, support his decision. Nonetheless, if Congresswoman Tlaib submits a humanitarian request to visit her relatives, the Minister of Interior has announced that he will consider her request on the condition that she pledges not to act to promote boycotts against Israel during her visit. And all of that is reasonable. The U.S. ambassador to Israel is David Friedman, and he released his own statement supporting Israel. The statement says, the United States supports and respects the decision of the government of Israel to deny entry to the Tlaib Omar delegation. The BDS movement against Israel is not free speech. It is no less than economic warfare designed to delegitimize and ultimately destroy the Jewish state. Israel properly has enacted laws to bar entry of BDS activists under those circumstances present here, and it has every right to protect its borders against those activists in the same manner as it would bar entrance with more conventional weapons. Initially, Israel had indicated it would accept the Tlaib Omar delegation and use their visit as an opportunity to engage with and educate the delegation members with regard to Israel's vibrant and robust democracy, its religious tolerance, and its ethnic diversity. Unfortunately, the itinerary of the Tlaib Omar delegation leaves no room for that opportunity. This trip, pure and simple, is nothing more than an effort to fuel the BDS engine that Congresswomen Tlaib and Omar so vigorously support. Like the United States, Israel is a nation of laws. We support Israel's application of its laws in this case.